Captain Pike's biggest change from 1960s Star Trek is his best Anson Mount perfectly portrays Captain Christopher Pike in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, fixing one very outdated aspect of Jeffrey Hunter's original Captain Pike. Jeffrey Hunter's Pike was initially meant to be the leading man of Star Trek, the original series, before being replaced by the more dynamic Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner. In Star Trek's original pilot, The Cage, Pike is captain of the Enterprise, and Leonard Nimoy's Spock is the only crew member who made the transition from The Cage to the rest of TOS. Captain Pike made a brief appearance in the Star Trek The Original Series two-parter, The Menagerie, after suffering a horrific injury while saving a group of Starfleet cadets. This officially established that Pike had been captain of the Enterprise before Kirk and set up several elements of Pike's story. Following his appearance in Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Anson Mount's take on Captain Pike became popular enough to earn his own spin-off. Strange New Worlds has since become one of modern Star Trek's best shows, with a compelling cast of characters led by Mount's near-perfect leading man, with one character change typifying this success. In The Cage, a woman named J.M. Colt Laurel Goodwin acts as Captain Pike's personal yeoman. When Colt delivers a report to Pike on the bridge, he comments that he can't get used to having a woman on the bridge. Realizing that his first officer, number 1, Majel Barrett, is in fact a woman, Pike quickly adds, "No offense, Lieutenant. You're different, of course." Not only do these comments reflect a view that was already becoming outdated by the late 1960s, but they also make no sense in the context of Star Trek's 23rd century utopian society. Jeffrey Hunter's Pike felt undeniably like a product of the 1960s, but thankfully his sexist attitude is not at all reflected in Anson Mount's take on the character. The Pike of Strange New Worlds surrounds himself with capable officers, many of whom happen to be women, and he treats all of his officers like family. The future world presented in Star Trek has no room for sexism or any other kind of prejudice, and Captain Pike's attitude reflects that worldview. He listens to all of his officers, considering their ideas equally, regardless of their gender, age, or species. Jeffrey Hunter's Captain Pike would not have worked nearly as well as Anson Mount's does as a romantic leading man. Captain Pike has all the qualities of a strong male lead, while also defying traditional gender roles in some ways. He's a strong leader without being arrogant or demanding. He seeks advice and knowledge from those around him, commanding the Enterprise in a more collaborative way than some other Trek captains have. Pike is also a romantic, without the leering qualities Kirk could sometimes have on TOS. Captain Pike clearly cares for and respects his romantic partner, Captain Marie Battelle, Melanie Scrofano, and he accepts that she is also an ambitious Starfleet captain. He is not at all threatened by her position in Starfleet, and he is the one who cooks whenever they are together. In his Starfleet uniform and an apron, Captain Pike represents the perfect leading man. Not only is Pike comfortable with who he is, but he's also comfortable being surrounded by strong, capable women. All of this only makes him more likable and attractive as a romantic lead in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Captain Christopher Pike, the original captain of the USS Enterprise in the Star Trek universe, has undergone one of the most profound transformations in modern science fiction since his debut in the 1960s. Initially introduced in the pilot episode of Star Trek, the original series, The Cage, Pike was portrayed by Jeffrey Hunter as a reserved and introspective leader. However, his character did not last long, as Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry opted to replace him with the more dynamic Captain James T. Kirk, played by William Shatner. Pike faded into the background of Star Trek lore until his modern revival in Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, where he emerged as a fan favorite. This reinvention of Pike, now played by Anson Mount, not only breathed new life into the character, but also became one of the best changes to the Star Trek canon, embodying the franchise's evolution in leadership ideals, storytelling, and inclusivity. In the 1960s, Captain Pike was a product of his time, stoic, isolated, and wrestling with internal conflict. The Cage depicted Pike as a man burdened by the weight of command, unsure of whether he wanted to continue his career in Starfleet. He was portrayed as an emotionally reserved captain, which reflected the general trend of male heroes during that era, tough, pragmatic, and quietly suffering in their leadership roles. Pike's original portrayal was thoughtful, but lacked the charisma and energy that would eventually define Captain Kirk and other Star Trek captains who followed. The decision to recast and redefine Pike decades later in Discovery and Strange New Worlds marked a turning point not only for the character, but for the Star Trek universe. Anson Mount's Pike is far more dynamic, compassionate, and engaged with his crew than his 1960s counterpart. This transformation is not simply cosmetic, it represents a deep shift in how leadership is portrayed within the Star Trek universe and reflects modern values. In many ways, the new Pike is the perfect embodiment of Star Trek's optimistic view of humanity's future, a leader who is thoughtful, emotionally open, and collaborative rather than hierarchical and aloof. One of the most significant changes in Captain Pike's character is his emphasis on empathy and emotional intelligence. In Strange New Worlds, Pike is shown to genuinely care about the well-being of his crew. He cultivates personal relationships with his officers, engaging them in conversations that go beyond their professional duties. This contrasts with the distant leadership style of his 1960s iteration, where command often felt like a lonely and burdensome responsibility. Mount's Pike actively seeks out feedback, listens to his crew's concerns, and most importantly, shows vulnerability. This shift reflects modern leadership ideals that prioritize emotional intelligence, collaboration, and an understanding of the personal lives of those under command. In addition to his emotional intelligence, the new Captain Pike is a master of diplomacy and inclusivity, traits that align with Star Trek's long-standing commitment to diversity and representation. Pike's willingness to seek peaceful resolutions, even in tense situations, highlights his diplomatic skills. He embodies the best of Starfleet's values, approaching potential conflicts with a level head and a desire for mutual understanding. In contrast, the original 1960s, Pike could be seen as more combative and inward-looking, dealing with his personal struggles more than addressing the needs of those around him. The modern Pike's inclusivity extends to his openness to diverse perspectives, both within his crew and in the alien civilizations they encounter. Pike's leadership represents a break from the more authoritarian captains of the past and embraces the idea that leadership is about serving others, not simply issuing orders. This inclusivity mirrors the broader evolution of Star Trek as a franchise, which has always sought to promote a vision of a future where humanity transcends its divisions. By making Pike a more collaborative and empathetic leader, the writers of Strange New Worlds reinforce Star Trek's progressive values while updating them for contemporary audiences. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Captain Pike's evolution is his relationship with fate. In Discovery, Pike learns about his future, a horrific accident that will leave him physically disabled and confined to a wheelchair. Rather than retreating in fear or resigning himself to his fate, Pike chooses to continue serving with the knowledge of his impending tragedy. This adds a layer of poignancy and nobility to his character that was absent in the original series. It is not just his leadership skills or empathy that define him, but his courage in the face of inevitable suffering. This element of Pike's story resonates deeply with audiences, emphasizing the importance of perseverance and duty, even in the face of personal hardship. Ultimately, Captain Pike's transformation from a largely forgotten character in the original series to a fully fleshed-out, emotionally complex leader in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds represents one of the best changes in Star Trek canon.